Jack London's War, an Odyssey of Survival. Jack London stood at the edge of the world, the fierce Alaskan wind whipping through his hair, carrying with it the scent of frost and danger. The icy expanse before him seemed endless, a stark contrast to the bustling streets of San Francisco he had left behind. This was the frontier, where man's will was tested against nature's fury, and Jack felt an insatiable hunger for the unknown gnawing at his soul. It was 1897, and the Klondike Gold Rush was in full swing. Fortune seekers from every corner of the globe had converged upon this frozen wilderness, driven by dreams of untold wealth. But Jack was different. His quest was not for gold, but for the raw essence of life, the pulse of adventure that lay buried beneath the snow and ice. As he trudged through the knee-deep snow, each step a testament to his determination, Jack's mind wandered back to his youth. Growing up in the turbulent streets of Oakland, he had always felt a sense of restlessness, a yearning for something more. The sea had called to him first, its vast, unpredictable nature mirroring his own inner turmoil. But it was here, in the heart of the Arctic, that he hoped to find the answers he sought. The night was closing in, and with it came the wolves. Their howls echoed through the mountains, a haunting symphony that sent shivers down Jack's spine. He knew he had to find shelter before darkness fully descended. The old prospector he had met in Dawson City had spoken of an abandoned cabin not far from here. With renewed determination, Jack pressed on, his breath visible in the freezing air. Finally, he saw it, a decrepit structure half buried in snow, its windows dark and foreboding. He pushed open the door, and it creaked ominously, as if protesting his intrusion. Inside, the cabin was sparse, with only a rickety table, a few chairs, and a cold fireplace. But it was a sanctuary from the deadly cold outside. As Jack set about lighting a fire, the flickering flames cast eerie shadows on the walls, and he couldn't shake the feeling that he was not alone. His hand instinctively moved to the knife at his belt. The wolves' howls grew louder, closer. He knew they were watching, waiting for their chance. Jack's thoughts drifted to the stories he had heard about the supernatural forces that roamed these lands. Tales of ghostly apparitions and malevolent spirits that preyed upon the unwary. He had always dismissed such stories as mere superstition, but now, in the heart of the wilderness, he began to wonder if there was truth to them. The night wore on, and Jack fought to stay awake. The fire crackled, casting a warm glow, but it did little to dispel the sense of unease. Suddenly, the door burst open, and a figure staggered in. It was a man, his face pale and eyes wide with terror. "Help me," he gasped, collapsing to the floor. "They're coming for me." Jack sprang into action, bolting the door and peering out into the darkness. He could see shapes moving in the distance, but it was impossible to tell if they were wolves or something else entirely. The stranger's words echoed in Jack's mind as he helped him to a chair. "Who's coming for you?" he demanded. "Not wolves," the man whispered, his voice trembling. "Something worse. Spirits of the dead. They haunt these lands, driven by an insatiable hunger for revenge." Jack's skepticism wavered as he looked into the man's haunted eyes. There was a fear there that he could not ignore. And then, as if in answer to the man's words, the cabin was filled with an otherworldly wail, a sound that chilled Jack to the bone. The fire flickered and dimmed, and Jack knew that whatever lurked outside was drawing closer. He felt a surge of adrenaline, a fierce determination to survive. This was what he had come for, the raw, unfiltered experience of life on the edge. But as the cabin was plunged into darkness, Jack wondered if he had ventured too far into the abyss. Dawn broke, but it brought little comfort. The stranger, who introduced himself as Samuel, recounted his harrowing tale. He had been part of a mining expedition that had stumbled upon an ancient burial ground. Desperate for gold, they had ignored the warnings of the native tribes and disturbed the sacred site. One by one, his companions had fallen prey to the vengeful spirits, until only he remained. Jack listened, his mind racing. He had always been a man of reason, but the evidence before him was hard to dismiss. The terror in Samuel's eyes was real, and the events of the previous night defied explanation. "We have to get out of here," Samuel urged. "There's a settlement a day's journey south. We can find safety there." Jack agreed, but he knew the journey would be perilous. The wolves were the least of their worries now. As they set out, the landscape seemed to shift and change, as if the very land was conspiring against them. Jack felt an eerie sense of being watched, and he couldn't shake the feeling that they were not alone. The day passed in a blur of snow and ice, and as night fell, they found themselves in a dense forest. The trees loomed like dark sentinels, their branches twisting and reaching like skeletal fingers. Jack's instincts screamed at him to keep moving, but Samuel was exhausted. They made camp, but sleep was impossible. The forest was alive with strange noises, whispers that seemed to come from the very trees. As Jack sat by the fire, his thoughts turned inward. He had always sought adventure, but now he wondered if he had been foolish. The wild was a place of beauty and danger, but there were forces here that he had not reckoned with. His mind drifted back to his family, to the loved ones he had left behind. He had always been a wanderer, but now, for the first time, he felt the weight of his choices. The night was long, and as the first light of dawn broke through the trees, Jack felt a renewed sense of purpose. They had to survive, to reach the settlement and warn others of the dangers that lurked in the wilderness. But as they resumed their journey, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that they were being followed. The shadows seemed to move with a life of their own, and every step brought them closer to the heart of the unknown. The path ahead was treacherous, winding through narrow passes and over frozen rivers. Jack and Samuel pressed on, their every sense on high alert. The air was thick with tension, and the silence was oppressive. It was as if the very land was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. They reached a narrow gorge, its walls steep and covered in ice. As they carefully made their way across, a sudden rumble echoed through the canyon. Jack looked up to see a cascade of snow and ice hurtling towards them. He shouted a warning, and they ran, barely making it to the other side before the avalanche buried the path behind them. Breathing heavily, Jack looked at Samuel, who was pale and trembling. "We have to keep moving," he said, his voice firm. "We're close now." As they climbed higher, the landscape became more desolate. The trees were twisted and gnarled, their branches reaching out like the claws of some ancient beast. The wind howled through the mountains, carrying with it the faint echoes of ghostly voices. They came upon a clearing, and there, in the center, stood a stone altar, covered in strange symbols. Samuel gasped and fell to his knees. "This is it," he whispered. "This is where it all began." Jack approached the altar, his heart pounding. He could feel a dark energy emanating from the stones, a malevolent presence that seemed to pulse with life. He reached out, and as his fingers brushed the surface, a vision flashed before his eyes. He saw the miners, their faces twisted in agony as they were consumed by the spirits they had awakened. He stumbled back, his mind reeling. "We have to destroy it," he said, his voice shaking. "It's the only way to end this." Samuel nodded, and together they set about dismantling the altar. As they worked, the wind picked up, and the ground beneath them began to tremble. Jack could feel the spirits closing in, their anger palpable. They had to act quickly. With a final effort, they toppled the stones, and a blinding light enveloped them. Jack felt a searing pain, and then everything went dark. When Jack awoke, he was lying in a bed, the soft glow of morning light filtering through a window. He sat up, disoriented, and looked around. He was in a small cabin, warm and safe. Samuel sat beside him, a relieved smile on his face. "You did it," Samuel said. "The spirits are gone. We're safe now." Jack let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. The ordeal was over, but the experience had changed him. He had faced the unknown and survived, but he had also glimpsed the darkness that lay within the human soul. As he looked out the window at the rising sun, Jack felt a sense of peace. He had come to the wilderness seeking adventure, and he had found it. But he had also found something more, a deeper understanding of himself and the world around him. He knew that his journey was far from over. There were still many adventures to be had, many stories to be told. But for now, he was content to rest, to reflect on all that he had experienced. The wilderness had tested him, but it had also given him a gift, the gift of insight. Knowing that even in the darkest of times, there was always a glimmer of light. I hope this opening captures the adventurous and introspective spirit you were looking for. If you'd like more chapters or any adjustments, feel free to let me know.